right, so this is the insert that I was talking about that I will be showing throughout this lecture to kind of help to elucidate the situation with this writing. And when all is said and done, it'll give you more of an understanding on where we're going with things. It may even help to kind of sum up things for you as well, too. All right, on the left side, we have the death drive. On the right side, we have Eros, which is the life drive, all right? Under the death drive is Nyx, the goddess of night, and then I say plus Erebus there, because Erebus is where she laid the egg, that in time, and you have Chronos, time and space being attributes of Chronos and Cronus, plus Ananke, which is the goddess of necessity, force, and constraint, right? And that equals Phanes, and that's also going to equal Eros, because Chronos and Ananke had Phanes via an egg birth placed into chaos, and also Eros was born from chaos in a form that is known as Erebus, which is basically it's basically darkness personified. So we have like a chaos image with the birth of Eros from an egg, from Nyx, who is night, laying that egg, that germ that had the germ of all life within it. So from darkness, you see light coming into form. If you follow the arrow from death drive to Eros, what you're going to see is from nothing. And let's look at the death drive area as nothing, the negative, non-existent, not. I have that written above the Hebrew letter on the left, which is on the left side of this drawing. To the right of the word death drive is Aleph Yod Nun, which is Ayin, and that means the negative, non-existent, or not. Okay, and you see that via the force of necessity, things are coming into existence, form, all right? And the force of necessity is Ananke. That's the goddess of necessity, force, constraint, and is pictured as female and serpentine. Bia was the goddess that was worshipped alongside Ananke traditionally, is the force of power, strength, and force. So anytime something is coming from nothing, it does so in sometimes a very latent way where it's non-recognized. Sometimes you even get a feeling inside of depression, of negativity, of not wanting to step forward into something. You feel an uneasiness, and then all of a sudden something new springs forth. If you look at the situations in your life and don't allow the olfactory senses to kick in. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, the olfactory sense as applied to this diagram and as applied to the way it plays out in life is that you could be going through something so many different times, having these negative feelings, having these feelings that tell you, I can't go forward, I can't continue, I can't, anxieties, fears based upon past continuances through the circle of just certain things happening in your life. And what will end up happening is you will see the anxiety, the pain, and everything else as routine. Of course, you're going to want to push it away. That's 99.9% of human beings' activity when it comes, and also response when it comes to the negative, towards anxiety and towards negative feelings when it comes towards accomplishing destiny or fate, right? We'll take the easiest route of least resistance. That's what we usually choose to do, right? And basically what the olfactory sense has to do with that is that you can have something that is terribly smelly inside of your house, right in your living room, right in front of you, and you sit around it for about, 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more for some. And what will end up happening is you no longer smell it. You're no longer aware of it until you step out of the situation and you go back to it. Then you're aware of it again, but that olfactory sense can kick in. It's the same way with things arriving into our lives out of chaos, or when we're in a chaotic state, what ends up happening is, because of the law of polarity, and this diagram shows polarity here because the death drive, the more negative, if you will, or darker side of this diagram represents the mother. In the upper right hand corner of this diagram, you're going to see the diagram of Boaz and Jachin, which are pillars that sat in front of the original Hebrew temple of the Jews, and you can find those pillars in front of Masonic halls everywhere. You know what I mean? And the black pillar, which is Boaz, has the symbol of the universe or the world on top of it. And as you can see in this diagram, it shows, okay, things from the mother are coming into form, you know. Also, too, the mother could be looked at for a man as the anima, and we have to face the mother aspect, the feminine image within us. We have to face it. We have to order it. We start on the lower levels of this, especially in our society, and we have to as just as any hero would do, we have to face that dragon type image within inside of us, which it definitely is, because of the anxieties, the fears, the different feelings that we're going to feel in respect to dealing with it. And it is very elusive because you can't see it unless you encounter images of it in a dream. Anyways, what ends up happening is this image, this entity, this energy, okay, will influence you, and the energy, the entity, etc., can be located as the amygdala, or as the serpent brain. They also call it as well, though, too, basal ganglia. And the thing is you see that Ananke is a serpentine deity, right? So that right there lets you know something. The egg that Phanes, or even possibly Eros was born of, was wrapped around with a serpent. Okay, it goes this energy, this phenomenon. Okay, that's basically lived out through us when we're facing fears, when we're facing destinies, when we have things that are coming anew, being born into our life, coincide with this fear, coincide with this anxiety. It's always a sign of a birth that's going to occur in your life. And the thing is we don't recognize it as such. We recognize it as just like, I'm depressed, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever. We go talk to a doctor, we get put on pills, but form is coming from nothingness. Now, as this form comes from nothingness via the force of necessity, we get into the side of the map here that says Eros or Phanes, right? Now, you see these lines on this diagram here. From the negative, non-existent, or not, we get I, ego, or myself. You find yourself by the way that you choose to step forward in response to anxieties, fears, in the hopes, and also in the action of making fate or destiny. And you have the Hebrew word ani to the left of the word Eros and Phanes right there, right? And ani means I, ego, myself. They both deal with the dead center of this diagram, which the dead center is the number 61 you see there. And 61 is the term for both ani and ayin, directly to the left next to death drive in Hebrew. And if you look at ani, the Hebrew is read from right to left. Aleph is all the way on the right, okay? Aleph is 1. Nun, the letter in the middle, is 50, represents the number 50, or is represented by. And the last letter, all the way to the left, is Yud, right? And that's 10. So you have 1, 50, 10 equals 61, okay? So 61 is the term that reconciles both the negative, the not, the non-existent, and relates it to I, ego, myself, meaning that things coming from chaos, from the more dark side of the pillar to the light side of the pillar, represented by Eros or Phanes. And you also see on in the upper right hand corner of this diagram the pillars of Boaz and Jachin. Again, I'm going to refer to those. Jachin is the one on the right. It's a masculine pillar, all right? And this masculine pillar has the zodiac around the globe of the heavens, okay? And the thing is we're goaded. This is the side that we're goaded on, as far as where it says Eros and Phanes. That's the side that represents we're goaded towards creating something and formalizing something and making something happen by desire, sometimes through love, sometimes through hate, sometimes through fear, anxiety, and all these other different type of emotions that could be negative. The negative ones lead to unity, lead to some type of thing happening if we act upon the goading. All right. Also, the positive aspects, just having a pure, sheer 100% desire can lead to unity. But the thing is, though, is a lot of times, though, these goadings are heralded by anxiety, depressions, feelings of emptiness, etc. All right. And Jachin leads to, it's a white pillar, but it leads to Boaz. The J actually should, but for the sake of the way that I drew it, I didn't put the J in dark lettering, but the J is supposed to be in dark lettering usually on these pillars. The white pillar will lead to the black pillar. The black pillar will lead to the white pillar. It's like the yin and the yang in traditional Chinese Taoism as well too, and that's a good way to think of it. And this the flowing of this diagram depicts the same type of thing, and how one thing will turn into the other. And really, because we have dualistic mindsets, we'll see it as duality, the father, the mother, you know what I mean, these opposites. But really, both sides of this and this diagram and what it represents are the same. Now, the thing is when we get into the Eros phase now, or the Phanes phase, the phase, if you will, of creating our world, right? Let's say we get over the death drive, the darkness, the Erebus stage of being in Hades, almost in the underworld. You know, we get past that stage, we move forward, even in spite of how we're feeling. We're creating what we're doing, we're making things happen. Now what happens is we go back into formlessness, and back into formlessness is going back into Nyx, the night, Erebus, which is under the earth. Traditionally, it's a negative state, you know, and all of this happens, the back and forth of going from death drive to Eros, Eros back to death drive, happens through time and space. It happens over a distance, over a period of distance in what it is that you're trying to accomplish. It happens through a period of time, through willpower and passage through point to point in distance of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And Eros goes back to formlessness, and you see the force of wantonness and overindulgence being placed at the bottom of that, because Venus, the god of love, beauty, desire, sex, fertility, and beauty, also prosperity and victory. Aphrodite is basically the equivalent to Venus, is there. I basically use those deities to locate on that side of the diagram that is going back towards the death drive, going back towards nothingness, going back towards the non-existent or not. Basically starting back from where you know, starting all the way back over from where everything that you started came from. Everything goes to nothing. Things that are in the non-existent, negative, or not, go to something, and that is what you term as I did this. You know, I did this myself. You know, it's an egoic accomplishment. A lot of times too, it can end up that you do things that were really part of your purpose, but the truth is that you'll find your purpose in understanding that this is just a cycle, and accepting that, hey, you know, life, Eros, Phanes, the life drive is part of the death drive, part of Thanatos, as Sigmund Freud put it. You know, he put Eros and Thanatos. When I made this diagram, I had no idea of the fact that, you know, that he personally had equated these two. And also too, I recognize that it was noted that later psychologists started putting Eros and Thanatos there, but also too, that's because they were reading these myths and understanding the underlying principles. And it just so happened that when I started putting this together, that it came out like this. So it's like, it's good to show this so that it can elucidate what it is that I'm talking about here, so that you can see. Now, when all is said and done, it's not that love, beauty, desire, sex, fertility, you know, these things are a negative thing. I'm in no way am I postulating any of this in a moralistic sense. In no way, just in a hypothetically true sense. Because keep in mind, right? Venus slash Aphrodite, if you will, was born through Cronus rather, castrating Uranos, which was his father and king of the gods at that particular time before she was born. All right, and this is symbolic, but she was born through the castration of the pure and divine will, meaning in order for you to create anything at all, something in some ways has to die. There has to be some acceptance of death. There has to be some type of death, because you're causing something new to come into life. Think about all the food that you eat on a day-to-day basis just to get from point A to point B and to make life happen. You know, something has to die in order for that to happen. So that proves already my statement. But I'm also talking on the underlying. You have to fight so many battles on the inside before you win certain battles that affirm what it is that you've done and says, hey, yeah, I won this battle. The thing is it takes something being killed. It takes it takes a part of your pure true will to become manifest, because one thing isn't the be all end all say all. You see what I'm saying? And really at the end of the day, all desires, all things that we choose to do, anything that is, comes from nothing. We can look at various pantheons, various cosmogonies, stories of creation across many different religious ideas, religious systems, if you will. And we're going to find that in the beginning there was darkness, and from the darkness came light, and that all the way we go to the back of the book of that religious choice or whatever, right? We're going to find that there's going to be some type of wiping out of the world and starting back over. Now we can take that literally, the wiping out of the world, maybe possibly so too, because it's an actual law. It's an actual law that things are predicated upon. Even if we look at it psychologically, everything that we do is going to be wiped clean and go to nothing at some point in time. So the thing is when that does happen, like literally, all that we really have to do in the end is just wait for it. So it's like, we can ask ourselves, is anything that we are doing worth it? Well, yeah, because of Chronos and Cronus, time, space on the in-between, we tend to think that, you know, our physical bodies, which time actually represents the physical body, time and space, because time, as Einstein postulated, was the fourth dimension. If you say fourth dimension, you also say three dimensions: length, width, height. You know what I mean? Or length, depth, and let's see, length, width, and depth, if you will, right? Or length, width, and height. You know what I'm saying? Three dimensions, and then you have time or space. You know what I'm saying? So if you're gonna talk about anything that you want to do, any object that you're focusing on creating, you have to do it through that aspect of time, right? And the thing is, though, is time, which entails matter, it comes from nothing, you know? It comes from nothing, or it comes from nothing at first. An idea comes into somebody's head. Oh, I want to create this, or I want to create that. And that's that Eros and Phanes portion of this map, the father, if you will, the idea, the logos, the word, you know, and the idea is put together, it's made, it's overused, and before we know it, you know, no object has a 100% lifeline on it. There are some objects that are going to outlast you and me both, but at the end of the day, they're all going to go back to nothingness, back to chaos. You know, so we have a great recycling system within that which we could call the self, you know, the self from which all things comes from, you know what I mean? But in this dualistic world, we basically think that things are forever, you know what I mean? Until we get old enough to see that, you know, hey, I'm possibly getting close to death. I'm possibly getting close to being past the point of this Eros or Phanes point, which they're both depicted as younger men, and Eros' counterpart Cupid is depicted as a young child. But you usually do see too, and I possibly will put that picture up quickly, that Chronos, which is time or space, right, or Cronus rather, right, Saturn, because that's the same deity, is clipping the wings of Cupid in one of these pictures, and that just depicted in and of itself is enough to show you, like, man, you know, time is that which destroys everything. You know, Saturn, right, as Cronus, for instance, was an eater of his own children. There were so many of his own children that he ate because he was told as a prophecy that one of his children was going to depose him from his throne, just like they did to Uranus. You know, that's just how Aphrodite was born, or Venus. You see what I'm saying? So the thing is it's not bad to have desire. I'm not moralizing this. I must stress that again, but I'm just saying that there comes a point in time where too much desire, too much enjoyment, too much of this creative energy will tank itself out, but it takes itself out and goes into nothingness in order to continue again. And that is the serpent, if you will. We're looking at Ananke, you know, the serpentine deity Ananke. We're looking at Kronos, who is represented by a serpent. We're looking at Phanes, again, as well, though, too, where it says Eros, who's represented as a serpent. All right? We're looking at these deities, and then time, just period. The serpent swallowing its tail. It's all about necessity at the end of the day. What ends up happening is, of necessity, life springs forth again because nature abhors a vacuum. All right? So this is something to think about. I'm going to basically show you as well, too, very quickly so we can get into this lecture and get into the rest of what I need to say here to you today. And let me see real quick here. Okay, so some of the pieces that I put down here at the bottom of this paper will explain it. Okay, pleasure turns into pain. Fullness turns into emptiness, right? But if we start on the left side, the desire to cease, so the desire to stop doing something, right? You stop doing something for quite a while, you sit up in that stagnation, will lead to the desire to obtain, the desire to start again, all right? Dissolution of form, so something dying, something, you know, being destroyed, all right? At some point in time, that same form of something, or maybe a newer, updated version that was created off the same idea of that form, coagulation of formless desire into form occurs. So that formlessness comes into form somehow again through this cycle. Wastefulness, so throwing things away, that wantonness energy, that energy of wantonness, which leads to wastefulness at some point, because of the pain and because of the choice to stand up to the uselessness of wastefulness, turns into usefulness. All right. Depression, which the death drive, Nyx night, Erebus, which is under the earth, like a hellish type of empty existence. All right. And then also even the idea of the negative, non-existent, non-being. You know what I mean? Which gives the idea of depression. Saturn, okay, at some point is going to turn around and turn into happiness through necessity, through nature, and through the fact that it's a law of nature that nothing can sit a certain way forever. Also, happiness will turn into depression. There will be a time when, even as a young person, your libido is going to be regressed. You have regression of libido there, right? On that negative, dark, maternal side, right? And when you're on the lower aspects of your anima, if you're operating out of those lower aspects, what ends up happening is sometimes you're gonna be faced with these negative things because, like, literally you're bringing it on yourself. Wastefulness, depression, regression of libido, emptiness, pain. These are things. This is life saying, hey, you can't sit in this forever. You have to slay this dragon and get to higher levels of your becoming. And when you do that, you start seeing that you break into more positive aspects. But it's not like the cat's out of the bag, or you being you. You're not done with going through this cycle, but the cycle becomes a lot more manageable at that point. And once you start to understand this cycle, you see even the depression is necessary. The happiness, you start looking at it and say, hey, you know what? It's going to end up going to this. So you can utilize your time wisely. Instead of going for just want, you can go for necessities. So 61, once again, is ani, which is I, ego, myself, the father side of this whole thing. Eros, the more manifest side. And then you have ayin on the left side, death drive side, the negative, non-existent not. All right. They're all termed under the number of 61. Form and formlessness being two parts of the same thing and actually one and the same as well. So it's something to understand as we get into this lecture. This has been 27 minutes, almost 30 minutes here of me talking. So this is going to be a pretty long lecture that I may have to end up abridging for this reason. But this lecture kind of gets into some heavy theory, some heavy ideas. And I want to make sure for my viewers that I'm not just talking into the air and saying things that at the end of the day are not really going to have much impact or meaning because they're misunderstood. You see what I'm saying? So if you can grasp that, we can move on with the rest of this really nicely, though. But the central idea is, now you're going to hear me in this lecture talk about sentience, right? Now, the central idea with even in the idea of 61, I, the real I, you know what I'm saying? You're going to have to understand that you have a sense of perception. You have an opinion, a way that you think, and a way that you feel, and affectivity at the end of the day. And I'll explain what that is coming up here in the lecture. Is something that you really need to understand on what side of affectivity are you, so that you can turn around and find out how to juxtapose yourself within this whole idea of pleasure, pain, non-existence, the I, the ego, the self, the mother, the father, between the polarities of Boaz and Jakin. You need to be able to find yourself in the center, because the closer you get to the center, the closer you're going to get to balance. But the center really is being sentient, being aware. So sentience links to Proto-Indo-European ES, and then H1ES, which means to be, and the Latin word sentio, which means I feel, I sense, I perceive with senses, right? I have an opinion, I think, I feel, also I agree. Basically saying not be a yes man, but be willing. Say yes to life. Say yes to whatever is put in front of you. And another part of that is not to be fake, but to be positive in the face of what is going on, and to be proactive also in the face of what's going on. Now, you have the Hebrew word, or root rather, hen, all right? And that's to say yes or to nod. Now, this goes back also to the nod of Jupiter. Jupiter, in a large way, represents the way that the self, or the way that the ego sees itself. It's that which says I, but it's really the small I. It's really the small s, all right? To say yes. That the perceiving part of you is the ego. You know what I mean? And keep in mind, the nod of Jupiter, all right? The egoic self-perception shakes the mountains, makes the gods tremble, was an expression of divine will. Nature trembles at his nod, even the universe, and rules all things with a nod. By just saying yes, there's so much that you can do by just having a positive attitude, by just going through things with your eyes open. And like I said, not being fake, not being a just yes man about everything that goes on, but by being the type of person that's stepping towards things with a proactive attitude, a can-do attitude, and really seeing where you stand in between the balance. This is everything, right? Now, the Roman deity Sentinus Deus, or the god of sense, really, you could say, right, gives thought to the infant in the mother's womb, right? Now, Sia is an Egyptian deification of perception and the intellectual energies in the heart of Ptah, the creator of the universe, who did so by the word, which is logos, right? Sia was also connected with writing, as he held the scroll, which symbolized intellectual achievements, right? The hieroglyph that you'll see here means to perceive, to know, or to be cognizant, to be aware, to be paying attention to what is going on around you. You know what I mean? You have to have that number one thing going on for you, and that's the problem with people in the world today, man, is that they're not paying attention. They're walking around with their eyes closed, man. I have a little son, and I'm always telling him, pay attention, Isaiah. You need to pay attention. It's mandatory, all right? So anyways, these are some other words that I wanted to throw in here as well, though, too, right? Aleph Nun Samek, Anes, means to allow, to make difficult or trouble, and then that is in respect to Anusha, which is the compression, or the compressed or narrow way. See also Anesh, man, Nasha, man rising up, yet also being made to forget. In this life, we've been made to forget what it is that is actually going on with us and around us. We've come here and really forgot what our purpose is, and forgot how to really live life. And I will explain some of that in this lecture, but just to give like a quick sneak peek on what I'm about to say is that we have several layers of the brain. Some of them are way older than others. Those are the ones you need to learn how to really master, and really need to learn how to delve into the unconscious, all right? So that you can get a step ahead of these younger brain levels that are in your head, that have not just recently, since you and I have been alive, since anybody listening at this point has been alive, but the more feminine brain center and the masculine brain center, you could say, the emotional center in the brain, the more rational or logic center in the brain that helps us to also deal with society, you know, addition, subtraction, being able to speak, you know, being able to read and different things like that. We think just because we're sophisticated enough to do those things that we know what's going on. No, there's a deeper brain layer that has the keys to, that has deeper, actually better keys, and is actually driving at the driver's wheel a lot of times, of even these newer brain centers. You know, we're basically being seduced from inside of us. But that seducer, if you will, can turn into a helper if we understand the language that it's speaking. All right, and the number 111 is in Aleph Nun Samek, to allow, to make difficult or trouble. All right, so something that is difficult, something that is troubling can be made easy if we just have an allowing and positive attitude. And 111 is the number of Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet that deals with the self, and it is a letter that represents God, if you will, as well too. And when I say self, I mean self with a big S. All right. Now, I'm going to read this last little statement here. Sigmund Freud stated, the conscious mind may be compared to a fountain. Flowing water equals libido, all right? Playing in the sun and falling back into the great subterranean pool of subconsciousness from which it arises. This idea fits well with the idea of circular movement within this diagram and subject. And it's something to keep in mind that the conscious mind, right, this flowing water, this libido, it's continuing to flow. Sometimes we lose track of this flow, and that the flow really is one. It's really one movement. All right, and if it's a circular movement, it's a movement representing the archetypal pattern and shape of the self. But a lot of times we separate that into one side and another side when it's really something that's unified, right? And I wrote this last note here, and then we're going to get into the main lecture. The painful affectivity on the introspective plane can be used as the catalyst towards extroverted creation of fate and destiny, finding oneself in the wake of that affectivity, which is the effect born of fighting through the chains of negative affect on the inner plane, one through action or actions. So it's like, man, you know, you have to get into how you're affected by certain things, right, on the inside, and understand that that is a cue that's letting you know, man, I need to either back up off of this because I'm thinking of doing the wrong thing. And if you're thinking of doing the wrong thing, you're being motivated a lot of times through a lower portion of your anima, or goaded to act out of a lower portion of your anima. Now, if you're acting from a higher perspective and you know that what you're about to do is right, you see what I'm saying? And you're acting through a higher anima principle, what happens is that same fear or that same anxiety is going to come, and you know what? You have to just act on it. You have to just move on it, man, because that's what's going to make you. And guess what's going to break you? The fact that you will not act on it, the fact that you will not do what it is that you know is right. You'll feel a whole lot better even if you suffer for what you know is right in the end. So, with all that said, we are going to get into the lecture, and getting into this lecture, I'm going to throw the diagram up there, pieces of it that pertain. That way we can go back and look at this while it is that I'm discussing in the background those things that are pertinent to the discussion and to this diagram, as this diagram directly pertains to what is being said here in this lecture series. So, with that, we will continue on.
Hey, how's it going? We're going to get back into the swing with another lecture. This one is called Reciprocity, Life and Death, Love and Hate, Order and Chaos, and it's understood via the Triune brain model, myth, and psychology. And the opening term reciprocity has some very big import here, because reciprocity is an equal exchange. Usually it's between two governments, but also too it's the exchange between two individuals. And there is even in this lecture there's a reference to it, the Norse rune of Gibo or Gifu, and I use that rune and the reference to that rune in this lecture series because we're talking about the unity of opposites, and opposites in this world of delineation between this and that delineation between suffering and between enjoyment, love, hate, life, death, black, white, positive, negative, etc., etc. They're all one existence, really. They're not really two separate poles, but the two separate poles give us room to think about what they actually are. And when we actually make the delineation and come to a good understanding of what the opposites are, we actually find that third thing in the middle, and that third thing usually leads us back to the self. But anyways, I'm going to start reading from this paper, and there is a diagram that I am going to introduce in this lecture. I may just pop it up on the screen here and there, as much of what I'm talking here will directly elucidate what's on this diagram itself. There are one or two other diagrams that I'll throw into this video as well, though, too, besides the sun and the fire chart, which will help to put all these various deities that I'm talking to together. I'm really talking about the same thing. A lot of times in these lectures, as time goes forward and as time goes on, you'll start to get it, and you'll start to notice, he said this, but it's really all the same thing. A lot of the ideas are congruent. That's why I call this this YouTube page, this YouTube talk series idea, Thinking in Circles, because we're talking about a circle, which is an archetype of the self, but we're taking certain angles of the circle and we're opening it up, we're expanding, we're explaining, we're learning. And we're just learning on one thing at the end of the day. So I would like to leave that with you first before we get into this reading. Please enjoy. If you haven't liked, please like. If you do like, share. If you wish to share, please subscribe so that you can open up or help me open up this page so that more subscribers can come in. It basically give me a certain platform on YouTube to reach many more people with this type of material. That's if you're touched by it. But anyways, right into the lecture, okay? So before I put this together, I hadn't read some of the works by Sigmund Freud, some of the ones that I've actually spoke upon here, and I've actually quoted him from. And the chart, one of the main charts for this writing that I put together, actually strangely has some of his ideas in there, and that's because his main original thought was disseminated throughout many other psychologists' minds, because he was one of the main founding fathers of psychology. You know, no matter what people think about him, no matter whether they like him or his ideas or not, he's one of the main ones that came out there and started it all. His break, or rather Carl Jung's break with him, added a new variety of flavor through depth psychology. But nevertheless, I'm going to start reading here. Psychologist Sigmund Freud initially expounded upon life instincts to explain human behavior, but with the publication of his book Beyond the Pleasure Principle, and there's a footnote there that I will get to here in a second, in the 1920s, the Beyond the Pleasure Principle book in the 1920s, he concluded that all instincts fall into two major classes: life drives and death drives. The drives which in these drives he's talking about, these drives, which include pleasure and pain and a variety of other connected and analogous experiences, are sensation experiences. The midpoint of the diagram I will unveil at the end of this reading, and probably throughout the reading, I dedicate rightfully to the God/energy that confers sensation upon a fetus when it is conceived. St. Augustine, the same philosopher and Latin church father who coined the word archetype, which Carl Jung used in much of his analytic psychology, said this of Sentinus Deus, which is the name of the deity, and in extension, Vituminus, the energy that bestows life on a fetus. In the city of God, book 1 through 10. Vituminus and Sentinus provide the really important gifts of life and sensation to the child who is to be born. In another place he says, these two deities clearly provide far more than do all those noble and select gods, for without life and sensation being the underline because I'm referring to Sentinus more in within this diagram. So without life and sensation, all that the woman carries in her womb amounts to no more than a worthless who knows what, comparable to mire and dust. So basically without sensation, right? Especially too without life, but without sensation in this idea, it's like, what are you here for? You're basically nothing. You might as well be a straw dummy sitting in the middle of a field. You know what I mean? So there was a mark when I was talking about Beyond the Pleasure Principle from 1920, a footnote. I'm going to read that very quickly, okay? Because this will help to kind of open up the idea that I'm speaking about here to you, all right? So, paraphrasing Collected Work 6, and that's Carl Gustav Jung's book, paragraph 138, Psychological Types, in reference to pain and pleasure. Affectivity is a term coined by Swiss psychiatrist Bleuler. Affectivity designates and comprises affects, slight feelings, or feeling tones of pain and pleasure. Bleuler distinguishes affectivity from sense perceptions and physical sensations, as well as from feelings that may be regarded as inner perception processes. For example, the feeling of certainty or probability, etc., or vague thoughts or discernments. It is a state felt as painful to the introvert, but not to be missed by the extrovert. Affectivity means the relatedness to the extrovert, being felt by him as more important than his ego, since affectivity is where his person lies. So affectivity in the introvert can be such a prison, but is the catalyst towards the production of great works of art and literature. Many of the great philosophers and psychologists were introverts. Their perceptions of pain and pleasure, being focused inward, fermented into the wine on which intellectuals are still reeling on until this very day. The extrovert obviously wishes to overcome, and many a time does, the affects he feels. He takes the challenge posed by the more negative, abysmal side of fear and doubt, tests it, and proves himself through his pain. He swears to his own hurt and does not change. And on the onslaught of his activities affects both maidens, those who hear of his greatness and wish to emulate, and affects the foes he defeats. All right. So basically, the introvert, he's on the really kind of a bad end of the affects that life presents him, and that maybe even some extrovert may throw on his table, though. But a good introvert will hold on to those opposite and negative feelings that he has, and he will turn them into great thoughts, great works, and some great things for other people to think about at a later time. But the extrovert really takes that affectivity that he feels inside, and he places it on the outside, because he really finds himself and that affectivity on the outside. He wants to place that on other things. He wants to see the affect or the effect or the affect of the effects that he caused in other people. You know what I mean? So for me personally, I view myself as a bit of an introvert, but also as an extrovert. I don't know if people could really understand how that could be, because I could flip the switch. I could be an extrovert very quickly. I can go introverted and be happy with being 100% alone 100% of the time, or 50% of the time, and then 50% of the other time be a complete extrovert and folks wouldn't know the difference. They wouldn't know that I had an introverted side if I was being an extrovert in front of them. That's just how simply easy it is for me to do that. And then also too, on the introverted side, I do that very well, and I feel at peace and I feel at one with that. So I have both sides, so I can understand both sides of this equation. Anyways, continuing forward. So he concluded that all instincts, talking about Sigmund Freud, he concluded that all instincts in his book Beyond the Pleasure Principle fall into two major classes: life drives and death drives, referred to later by psychologists as Eros and Thanatos. Eros was the Greek god of love and sex. His Roman counterpart is Cupid, god of desire, erotic love, attraction, and affection. The latter, Cupid, is usually described as the son of Venus, goddess, who is the goddess of desire, beauty, love, abundance, and victory, and of Mars, the god of war and agriculture. This genealogy or parentage of Cupid being the equivalent of Eros is an important fact due to the reason that Cupid/Eros is the energy or god that represents unity of opposites, and that his parents represent both love, Venus, and strife or hate, Mars, through the energy of war. And they sufficiently describe the means by which the goading process, which is driving, urging, the word goading, driving, urging, provoking, or annoying to stimulate some action or reaction. And then they basically are showing you how the goading process occurs. It's through love, lust, desire, to come together in some form of unity, and it's also hate. It's the urge to destroy something, to obliterate something, so you're at one, right? Okay, so let me see, on to the next page. Now, it is important to mention Phanes, who is equated with Eros, who we were just talking about earlier. And it is for this reason that I make this mention. Phanes was the god of energy of procreation, of energy by mingling or mixing of pairs of opposites, which is the theme of the conjunctio in alchemy. And the conjunctio is the unity of opposites, which the goading or inciting energy of Eros and Cupid procured. Phanes was also the god of generation of new life, which uniting of opposites does, as it creates a third thing out of the unity of opposites. Phanes was a god of energy, of light, whose name meant to bring light or to shine, and was the firstborn cosmic deity out of the watery, empty chaos who gives birth to the universe. Some accounts say that he was hatched from the world egg of Kronos, which is time, and Ananke, necessity, compulsion, and fate. She is the deity of those attributes. Kronos is almost identical to Aeon. Aeon also resembles Phanes. I'll be depicting this for you in this lecture. Aeon is a deity or energy of time, the orb or circle of the universe, which is a symbol of the self archetypally, and the zodiac, which are the 12 signs of the zodiac. And I'm going to continue on this page, but I need to read to you in the margin something about Phanes here. Phanes, in inclusion to being linked syncretically with Eros, also was equated with Mithras. And if we take into the account the communicative, linking, amicable nature of joining together explicitly, even if it is in strife, it's still unification. We will see that Mithras has to do with Eros and Phanes. For Mitra means friendship, god of contract, and the Sanskrit word Mitra means also friend and friendship. CPIE, or Proto-Indo-European root MEI 1, and I'll be throwing that up on the screen. So we were talking about Aeon in connection with Kronos, all right? So Kronos basically being almost identical with Aeon, right? And how he was a symbol that, and basically how he was surrounded with the circle of the zodiac, right? Which are the 12 signs of fate/destiny. Aeon is said then also Cronus or Chronos, to change the burden of old age like a snake who sloughs off the coils of the useless old scales, rejuvenating while washing in the swells of the laws of time. And that's a state by Thanatos of Panopolis in a book called the Dionysiaca. Ananke, Eros, Asophanes, okay, and Chronos/Cronus, who is associated closely with Aeon, have a few things in common I will name in the order of importance to this lecture. The serpent is one of them, all right? Now, on a footnote, I'm going to read something here about the serpent. Ananke and Chronos are mates together in serpentine form. They are depicted as a tie around the universe. They together crush the primal egg of the universe of creation, which parts became earth, sea, and the heavens to form the ordered universe. And I also put in footnote here CATU 21, which is the 21st card of the tarot called the World. I'm going to throw that up because you're going to see at first when I first seen the tarot deck, I thought it was a wreath surrounding the world. No, this is symbolic of Chronos, all right, and Ananke in a binding in a union, because that the world is also that egg from which so much creation comes from, all right, and they're disguised almost as a banded and uniform wreath. And you'll see this as I put this up. All right, so continuing on the similarities, right, that all these deities have together that I just mentioned in these pages passing. The serpent is what they have in common. As important, the serpent is important to the origin and bodily center that regulates the more misunderstood primordial and archaic and occulted urges to fate and destiny. Okay? The egg is another thing that they have in common. All right? And the egg is related to Proto-Indo-European root ak. All right? And the egg as the origin from the womb of the mother, a symbol also of the world, the creation of worlds and their inhabiting entities. All right, so it has to do with those things. The zodiac is what they also have in common as well, though, too, as the energy of influence to fates, of which are many in life. Fates are many in life. All right. Also destiny, of which there are few, some great and unique, some typical and expected, that befall us all, life and death. All right. So also too, archetypal symbols and arrows. All right, because this is the thing you got to keep in mind. Arrows are something that across the board with these deities, that they are attributed to these deities, but arrows and symbols are linked as one thing together as well, though, too. And I'm going to show this from this Proto-Indo-European root, GWEI, and we'll put that up on the screen, and you're going to see that symbols and arrows link together ideologically. All right, and even the word symbol, and it may be reflected in this Proto-Indo-European root, and I'm going off of memory here, that the word symbol actually means to has an idea of being thrown together. You know what I mean? Being thrown, something that's hurled, something that's packed and put together, and that is hurled and that's sent out. All right. Now, the footnote for symbols and arrows being one, see Surah 5:3, and then also 5:90, and this is in Al-Furqan in the Quran. All right. Now, belomancy is what they're referring to in these surahs. Okay, belomancy is the divining of futures and fates by the use of arrows. And what do symbols do as far as the impulsion and as far as the compulsion that you feel inside, the influence from Nuit, the Egyptian Nuit, the mother who is the vault of heaven, who has the stars on her, and her energy is pushing in on the consciousness and on the objects, if you will, of the universe, and creating fate through the symbolic aspects of the zodiac, right? This is basically showing that the zodiac or astrological symbols, right, they're like arrows being hurled at certain things, uniting and linking things, creating fates, creating destinies. All right, so Belomancy has to do with Surah 5.3, and 590 will give us a bit of an understanding of how symbols and arrows connect. Proto-Indo-European, GWELE, it means to throw, reach, with meanings of piercing. Symbol is among the root words listed, okay? So arrows and archetypal symbols have something to do with all these deities that I just aforementioned. And then in the idea of symbols and arrows, impulsion and compulsion, and also methods of deducing the meaning of and the way by which fate and destiny is received. For example, arrows of Eros / Cupid cause object love, which is a conjunctio / calcinatio symbolized operation. Something to think about. All right. So I want to continue forward here. Chaos or the abyss, they all have that in common as origins. All right. The void state is what chaos or the abyss is, preceding the ordering of cosmos. The ground zero for creation is chaos or the abyss, also referring to the gap of separation between heaven, sky, and earth, and is also a common factor amongst these deities, and in a mundane fashion points to the tension of opposites, that which creates consciousness by delineation of opposites, and for this reason is alchemical separatio / coagulatio symbolized, and is that which brings about the compulsion to bridge the gap of heaven and earth, of have and have not, of love and hate. It is a constellator of the conjunctio urge, for example, Eros. But it is a between space, for example, limbo. All right. In the Hebrew idea, it is called Gia, which is equal to the number 14. That's Gamel, Yod, Aleph. Gamel being 3, Yod being 10, Aleph being 1. You add those up, you get 14. And there's a footnote, right? Interestingly enough, Gia, the word denoting this space for consciousness and creation, is reflected in a word I have been touching on in the previous videos as the vehicle in the psyche that bears the attributes of perception, the ruach, which equals 214, which ruach is a root word. Okay, so I'm talking about the Semitic root, right? Means to widen, spread, make / leave a space. All right, so space is really the underlying word. To be widespread, spacious, feel, F-E-E-L, with the spirit of. Separate particles, for example, as in the idea of entropy, which is the measure of uncertainty or randomness, for example, chaos ordered by measurement. Gain, earn, profit are ideas with this. Smell, scent, sniff, nose, track, detect, for example, the senses. The nose points to Mercury, god of science, rationality, the alphabet, and mathematics, the cause and end of the alchemical work. So that vacuous space, all right, gives creation in the way of creation. It gives enough space so that consciousness can be born. Opposites, in between opposites, there's a space for consciousness to play out and do its thing. All right, so that is something really to think about. Why there's so much distance between this and this? Why there's distance between what you desire to have and then also what you do not have? What fills the space between those two things? What brings those opposites together is your consciousness. All right, so Gia has immediate intimations in gematria of the idea of separation or delayed gratification being the cause of burning desire. Besides having a serpentine form, which is the theriomorphic, meaning animal / man, you know what I mean, or having the form of an animal, right? And that serpentine form is prehistoric animal, all right? These deities all have a relative human anthropomorphic form. So they have both forms, anthropomorphic and serpentine, which is theriomorphic, which is very important as it relates to both the hidden and manifest faculties in the human psyche, which correspond to the ancestral reptilian core, the basal ganglia, which is the older center in the brain, right? And the limbic and neocortical components of the brain, for example, the more human or mammalian, right? Between which serpent and human centers there is interplay. The former serpent or reptilian brain being misunderstood by the latter mammalian or human, and unless strove with towards understanding, we are all still unconsciously controlled by. All right. So I'm gonna get into this very, very unique understanding that can be gleaned from Genesis chapter 3 in the Bible, that's really going to explain this whole idea of the triune brain in a new light. I'm going to do this from the Bible because when all is said and done, we all have the all meaning in the West. Western places have in the unconscious, we basically have Christianity rooted deep within us. You could basically have maybe grown up reading the Bible, maybe your parents reading the Bible to you, maybe having read the Bible a long time ago yourself. Because the information is archetypal, there is a lot of that information that is still at the basis. And one of the base stories, since it's one of the first ones that anyone remembers, is the story in Genesis of the fall of mankind. So I'm going to explore this with you guys, and it will elucidate a little bit more the idea of the triune brain and the idea of what maybe the serpent really is, what maybe Adam really is, maybe what really Eve is within that lens. So here we go. So referring to Genesis chapter 3, most all of it, all right? And I'll be putting up some cues that you might be able to follow along with as far as the story is concerned. I may end up doing that, or just throw some pictures up that will brighten up the whole picture for you. Anyways, I believe that the story of Adam and Eve points to this whole idea of the triune brain, right? It was the serpent acting as a sort of initiating logos to Eve. And Eve refers to the feminine, more right brain, Eros, receptive receiver of the word, who spoke to Adam, and Adam represents the more right brain, logoic, analytical, and discriminating of symbol and emotion part of the brain. All right, to enter into something prohibited. All right, the serpent basically was trying to get them to enter into something prohibited. He went to Eve, talked to Eve, Eve talked to Adam. You see, kind of almost a chain of command. All right, but this chain of command is basically revealing how the animus will initiate the female, right? The hidden male will initiate the female. The hidden female will initiate the male. All right, and this is referring to parts of your psyche, actually. All right, so the serpent used the woman to speak to the man so that they could enter into something that was prohibited. All right, and that which was prohibited was knowledge. It's not just simple knowledge that we're talking about here. Oh, to know, great. Yeah, it was prohibited. It's something more, and we're going to get to that, all right? So there's a footnote on the word prohibited, and I'm going to read this to you real quick. And before I continue here, please forgive me for all these footnotes, but the information that I'm speaking to you about, if I was just to read these papers all the way through, if you're to read some of the books that have this type of information all the way through without any elucidation on the information that you're reading, what ends up happening is you end up getting super lost. And I hope that in my attempt to elucidate these things with these footnotes that I'm not losing you all together. But anyways, speaking on the word prohibited, this is what you're going to get here, all right? The ancient Hebrew letter teth for serpent, okay, it means serpent, has a universal symbol attached to it, which all will attest to when seeing it denotes prohibition of this or that. And I'm gonna throw the symbol up there because your mind's immediately gonna say, oh, that's the no symbol, or this is prohibited, don't enter there, right? I will place it on the screen. Also, PIE root, Proto-Indo-European root, BHA, which means to speak, is the root of the word ban, like a ban on assault firearms, right? In other words, to prohibit. The word be is also in the BHA root, the BHA2 root, to speak as well, and is a creature which mythologically links to desire. The bow of Kama in the Hindu pantheon, who is the Hindu god of desire, for example, has a bowstring formed by bees. This relates to the psychologic notion that desire is caused by that which is unattainable or otherwise termed as taboo or prohibited. Proto-Indo-European root GABH, to give or receive, is directly the root of the word prohibit, which leads to the Germanic or Norse rune gibo, and I'm gonna throw that one up there as well though too, which I will place on the screen, which has the same form as the ancient Hebrew teth and links to the idea of gift, giving, sacrifice, also sacred marriage. And sacred marriage in the Greek idea was the heros gamos, which was the uniting of the opposites, which leads to greater consciousness. All right, and that greater consciousness is knowledge. And I put here in parentheses after the word knowledge, that is a conscious unity, conjunctio. It was done by way of a fruit representing desire, but the serpent's nature is also desire. This desire led to advanced human consciousness, mammalian consciousness. And keep in mind that in the Gen Aden, which is Garden of Eden in Hebrew, Adam and Eve could hear the voice of both God and his prospective shadow, the serpent, clearly. Once mammalian consciousness kicked in after being cast out of communion with God in Gen Eden, right? They could not hear God except on occasion, possibly through the voice of the unconscious, possibly, or through the voice of the conscience, rather. Yet the serpent was cast down with them to cling to the dust, or more literally, telek afur or afur takala, right? You shall go and dust you shall eat. In other words, the psychological id, though the physical aspect in man of the brain center of the basal ganglia or amygdala would be the agent by which the serpent or older brain function would continue to be able to have a guiding influence upon our new mammalian brain, the limbic system structure, and incentivizes methods of perception. Furthermore, the woman is cursed in addition to the serpent causing enmity to exist between her and it. Okay, now there's a footnote about the word enmity. Enmity is aiv, to be hostile to an enemy, to be hostile to an enemy of, show enmity. Yet aiv equals 13, and 13 equals achad, to unite, combine, be one, join, amalgamate, unify, associate with, make unique, standardize, normalize, homogenize, even out. So you see unity and enmity. Love, which is unity, and hostility, enmity, hate, they're one idea, and in the goading process serve the purpose of conjunction. For examples, opposites attract and birds of a feather flock together. Those are opposite statements, but they lead to the same thing. And in life, if you can really see this and really see the processes that I'm talking about here with this triune brain model idea, how it's working through you, this is what you're getting, all right? You're getting unity through two opposite energies that seem like they're really opposite, but they're really both one and the same, all right? So the emotional feminine aspect and the instinctual libidinous aspect, serpent, okay, is what we were talking about when we say the woman is cursed in addition to the serpent, causing enmity to exist between her and it. That's the emotional feminine aspect and the instinctual libidinous aspect, which is the serpent, okay? The woman's seed bruising the head of the serpent via its heel, and the heel of her seed being bruised. There is an interplay between the basal ganglia or amygdala, causing emotional influences of reward, hope, fear, and anxiety in following or producing a fate and destiny or purpose. So it affects cognition and emotion. The mammalian brain or the limbic system is layered over or sitting on top of the serpent brain as well. And this could be the veiled reference in scriptures to the bruising of the heel of the woman's seed, the mammalian brain, and the head of the serpent. And this is in inclusion to the comments I made about the interplay of the serpent and the mammalian brain earlier stated. Her multiplication in birth would be through sorrow, which is an indicator in life that if we experience sorrow or resistance within, this sorrow and resistance is creative power. It is not to be misunderstood for what it seems. It is the herald of new birth. And on this note, I put in Revelations 12:4-9, note that the serpent in verse 4 is ready to devour the child or thought, or the divine thought, as soon as it is born. That's what the child represents, is divine thought, right? So this is also, for example, Phanes being born of time and necessity in chaos, all right? And this new birth happens in chaos, in a chaotic, watery abyss. So these feelings that you're feeling, these negative feelings a lot of times, especially when it comes time for you to do something, to get something done, to make something happen, a lot of times that amygdala is going to kick in and say, oh man, maybe you shouldn't do this. Maybe you shouldn't go through with this, And the thing is if it's a life or death, even if it's a life or death experience, right? Sometimes it's better to make the choice to accept fate and to create destiny as well too, and that is for you to weigh out in the situation if that is worth it. All right, so let me see here where we are at. Okay, now the curse comes to Adam, who represents in this case the human brain or neocortex, which regulates language, abstract thought, imagination, consciousness, reasoning, and rationalizing. Adam, or the neocortex/human brain, was given precedence over the mammalian brain, limbic system, Eve, all right? But was told in veiled prose that emotions influenced by the serpentine center and spoken via the language of the serpent of desire and reward mingled with anxiety, fear and procrastination and sorrow and adversity, inner adversity, would be the way that fate, destiny, and calling to purpose would be attained. And there's a side note here. Pain is necessary to acclimate oneself towards, as it is associated with attainment and obtaining what you strive for. Too much pleasure can make you soft and ruin you, but it is rejuvenating, right? On the idea of pleasure and pain, which reward and fear correspond to, it is interesting to note that aneg, the word aneg in Hebrew, ayin nun gamel, it means to give pleasure, enjoy, delight, please, indulge in luxuries, make delicate, sport, marry, also make you soft. The word to make soft is in the idea of a neg. All right. Now you also have nega, strike, which means to strike, smite, inflict, afflict, injure, punish, infect, befall, come to pass, reach, attain, arrive, approach, obtain. All right. Both words equal the number 123. So we have these two opposites under the same numeric term. All right. That's something really to think about, because if these two numbers in gematria, right, if two numbers are under the same term, a lot of times you'll see that they're opposites, but they're united under the term of one number. So these opposites complement one another somehow, some way, and the pleasure can spoil you. Pain can actually be the catalyst to which will make things come to pass. So it's something to think about. All right. Now, Aden, which is the last term in the word Gen Eden, Garden of Eden. Okay, equals Aden equals 124, which is one number after 123. So one number after a number usually represents the vision of something. What is it? What does it look like? What is it represented as? Right, Eden. Okay, Eden in English, Aden, which Aden equals 124, which is a word of the Garden of Eden, meaning to pamper, coddle, make pliant, pliable, tender, delicate, bend, smooth, improve, refine, refresh, invigorate, luxuriate, delight, be ennobled, take pleasure, bind, connect, or indulge. So there's some good things in there, but too much of that, you can see it in the excess of the terms. It all the great good things, all the luxuries of life will make you soft and make you easy to break. All right. So in the casting out of Gen Eden, we're talking about Garden of Eden. All right. And Adam, Eve, the serpent, and Jehovah. Right. In the casting out of the garden, also levels of communication with the inner/higher self and these other levels of consciousness within our lives that are of day-to-day import were confounded as we ever moved away from the source. Yet the kingdom of God is within. Gen Eden, even the Garden of Eden, is within. But we must go back in time, back to a center deep inside of us. And the last verse in this chapter actually is the way this happens in conclusion and expulsion. And it's actually giving us a key to the way back in. Okay? So Genesis 3:24, this is the last verse, and it's showing you how to get back to a state of elucidation, a state where you actually have a deeper level of communication and a deeper power to make things happen within your life. All right. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. The last part in Genesis 3:24 refers to consciousness being far removed from its original state due to blindly following the impulse to wantonness and desire. You can see the flow on that chart that I created to slightly illustrate what I'm talking about here. You can be doing so much. You know, everything comes from a formless state, right, into manifestation. But you can be doing so much, and you can go so far on one side of desire and trying to go forward and towards desires that what ends up happening is what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're going towards is going to go back towards nothingness. All right. So the impulse to oneness and desire presages the formation and further evolution of greater egoic consciousness. that has patterned civilization and societies of modernity. Okay, in this case, the sin of Adam and Eve, listen to the serpent, gave them more egoic consciousness. All right, it opened up their minds. Okay, because what happened, we're going to see here. It is important to note that the state previous to this left brain state, this human-minded neocortex state, was that state of oneness with God / higher self, which is spelled with a capital S, and his primal shadow, the serpent. And the environment, even if you picture it and how it is often depicted, was a primitive aboriginal nature / natural setting. Then in the Sumerian means plain or open country, and it gives the idea of relatively or wholly undeveloped natural land expanse. For example, the land before time as we know it, with highways and metropolitan buildings, etc. This is how we know time now. The Akkadian root means desert or steppe, which renders the void of modern civilization idea spoken of earlier. An interesting Semitic root rendering gives that Aden means time, duration, year, which implies simply existence, like just existing, almost a vacuum-like state. Now, nature abhors a vacuum, an empty and stagnant state, which statement is attributed to Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. This statement develops the next point, yet this point basically points out that the serpent as an animal, representing the primal and primordial aspect and animal nature, even in man, acts upon and imposes upon man's psyche the urge to do that which will in turn lead to survival for the organism to which it is attached. For example, the amygdala, serpentine / reptilian basal ganglia center, right, in your brain, will work upon the mammalian limbic system, which is the feminine emotional center, and the human neocortex masculine center by desire, reward incentive, anxiety or fear, and even showing those centers appeal towards that which is convenient in order to prolong survival. This is wise oftentimes, but we must challenge these desires in favor of what is best to manifest fate or destiny for ourselves, which can be sorrowful, painful, and downright uncomfortable. There's a footnote. The serpent is attached to our brain, so in doing what it thinks is best for survival of our physical structure, so to speak, right? It's always doing what it thinks is best. The brain is the proverbial Garden of Eden. The serpent in Scripture, as a separate entity in the veiled Scripture, shows his interest in his hosts, Adam and Eve, and their further survival. For example, the survival of the human species through conscious growth and expansion via his or its act. This act was committed out of necessity and time, the vacuity of time, needing to be filled with something, and that something is consciousness. The difference in pressure creating an immediate force that led to equilibrium. The cherubim at the east, the quadrant of consciousness in humanity, who keep the way of the tree of life, are none other than the four faces on the angel in Ezekiel's vision, and are associated with Eros. Now, how is that? How the cherubim are associated with Eros? Check this out. In one Orphic account, Eros, the god of love, sex, desire, unity, goading, all right, was shown to have four heads like the cherub in Ezekiel's vision. One of a bull, lion, serpent, and a ram. Okay, so. And also the second Sephirah Chakma or Chakma, wisdom in the Kabbalah, is what this idea relates to as well, as far as the cherubim, right? Cherubim, right? And this alludes to a saying due to the fact that the four faces are representative of the name of God. The Yod in the name of God. So the name of God is Jehovah, Yod He Va, He, right? Yod or Yud is the lion, He is the eagle, Vav is the man, and He is the bull, and are fire, water, air, and earth respectively, comprising the whole tree of life. As the letters make separations of the worlds the tree contains in its unity. The reference saying is Irat Yehovah Rashit Deyat. The amazement or wonderment at the name of God of 4 letters, which is the body of the tree of life, is the beginning or looking at the face of knowledge, right? Or basically the amazement or wonderment of God is the beginning of knowledge. For example, the way back into the garden, for the door of the garden, which is desire for divinity, lies at this point. You know, meaning we gotta get amazed at all of the faculties that are represented by the name of God, you know. And even Carl Jung put out for the 4 worlds, or the 4-letter name of God: thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. We have to get a desire and an amazement for for what those senses entail. We have to get in a desire and an amazement for those things, because once we do, we're going to see the world in a whole different light. We're going to want to scrape and dig and get down to the depths of what of the roots of those things. You see what I'm saying? So anyways, the flaming sword, which may be seen as a reference to Cryasor, brother of Bellerophon, who is also connected to Perseus and Pegasus. Cryasor, meaning golden sword, is he who was born alongside of Pegasus, but is also a copy of Pegasus in myth. For Pegasus is mentioned after or later in the myths. Only Cryosaur's birth is mentioned. All right. Cryasor and Pegasus were born from the decapitation of Medusa. The chimera Bellerophon kills is also a chaos monster. A chaos or chaotic form of the anima is what basically a chaos monster is, right? And it's conquered by the hero Bellerophon / Perseus, who are, as heroes, the same entities with the same storyline, and were in time conflated with one another. Something telling, though, is that Bellerophon is given the same equation by genealogy to Pegasus, to a horse. Bellerophon and Perseus represent the eastern light of the solar consciousness, and Medusa and the Chimera represent the chaos creatures, the shadow in a way, and the darker lower part on the levels of the animal, which must be overcome and raised. Yet the sword of gold, Cryasor, the sword being the weapon of consciousness in the east, and gold via alchemy being brought out of lead, chaos, Cronus, the abyss, Saturn. That's what lead is representative of, is the new birth. So the gold being brought out of the lead is the new birth, or the magical healing and restoring child. And I have had a personal encounter with that psychological image of the child, and I'd like to share that sometime with you guys. This relation of Bellerophon, also then Perseus to Pegasus, and their link shows that the conscious ego, having rectified the darkness from the shadow in lesser animal figures, becomes and secretly is one with the purified forces of the instinct and libido. They are brothers, but the link to that cooperation is not manifested until the anima and primarily the shadow aspects are dealt with and are spiritualized. This brings forth a second birth, a reunion with a side of you that is full of life, youth, power, and vigor. It leads to the abundant life promised by the Christ, who also happens to be a solar, fiery, light Perseus is linked also to the god Mithras. So that is one reason why I'm mentioning him in line with Mithras. The other is because there is a great connection with the conscious application of psyche energy, and these heroes / deities aforementioned in this lecture as pertains to unveiling of a formula I will show in a quick diagram that relates to Perseus, Pegasus, Chrysaor, and also the higher anima figure of Minerva. Minerva and Athena, for that matter, are animus figures of the highest kind, ranking with Sophia, the wisdom in Proverbs chapter 9. The strange woman the strange woman and the foolish woman in scriptures corresponds to the lower and chaotic anima figures who need to be risen above. Remember, in respect to the lower aspects of the animal development, of which Jung named 4, right? Cronus, time, melancholy, symbol, spiritual matter, with the help of Gaia, Earth, created Aphrodite Venus, which was cardinal desire, via the castration of the then king of gods, the divine will Uranus. The importance of this being that the body and an ill adjustment to necessity and time, for example, by procrastination, cowardice, refusal to do what we know we must, laziness constellates and feeds carnal desire that leads to agnostic devolution. Better choice in anima advancement is represented by Aphrodite Urania. And I'm going to put pictures to these deities up here. That way you can kind of get a greater view, a greater vision of exactly who and what these are. So continuing, and this is a footnote that I made for women that may possibly be listening to this channel. So speaking of Minerva, she could be a feminine, egoic image, a hero to any woman in the listening range of this lecture. The male figures becoming the animus responsibility for you then, okay? That's why they use the word contrasexual, because for a woman there's going to be a hidden man aspect, which is the animus. So with these stories, a woman could turn around and flip the information and get something out of it, just as a man would be able to see the feminine archetypes in a story and gain something from it. All right, so let's get on to this formula, all right, found in the myth of Perseus and Medusa, to include Minerva and Pegasus. All right, this formula and shortly summarized version of the myth facts sum up much of what I've been expounded upon here, and will also help you to see the type of symbolic thinking being used, which elucidates any mythological, scriptural, archetypal literature. This method is procured by knowledge of symbolic systems and keys. Knowledge of such things flings closed veils and doors open, and can give you access to ancient formulas of the psyche, which are known by initiates of mysteries and are wisely hidden in what most foolishly think are merely fairy tales. All right, so the story that we're going to get into is the taming of Pegasus, and it directly relates to everything that we've been talking about here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. In the epic story of Perseus, who replaced Bellerophon due to being more culturally familiar during the Middle Ages, Medusa, a once beautiful priestess of Minerva who became the Gorgon, which means grim or dreadful, due to the fact that Minerva walked into one of her temple shrines and witnessed Medusa kissing Neptune and turn her into this monster as a punishment for sacrilege and hybris. All right, sacrilege, we already know what that is. Most all of us do. Hybris is basically audacity being shown in the face of the gods. Like, just think about somebody that would make out with somebody in a church. Maybe some of us have, but when all is said and done, just think about, like, if God was looking down on you if hypothetically, if that's what was going on, and God was going to materialize before you, maybe what he would do. If you were a girl, in this case, he turned you to Medusa. So Perseus beheads her by use of subterfuge, courage, and a mirrored shield by which he reflected her terrible gaze upon herself, and then slashed her with his sword. And from the bleeding gape at her neck came forth Pegasus and Chrysaor, who is heard of no longer in the myth, and whose name means he who has a golden sword. Minerva, and I'm going to get into all of her credentials, but I'm not going to confuse you here. Minerva caught the horse Pegasus and tamed it before gifting the horse to the Muses. And I'm going to get into their details in just a minute. We're going to continue the story. It was a kick from Pegasus that was said to have opened the fountain Hippocrene on Mount Helicon in Greece. Now I'm going to talk about these 3 points via the footnotes that I've made, because it's going to elucidate a little bit. Now on Minerva, Minerva is the goddess or energy of poetry, medicine, commerce, weaving, the crafts, wisdom, courage, inspiration, victory, war, law, civilization, bravery, heroism, protection, city-state, family, justice, mathematics, science, technology, strength, strategy, the arts, and skill. And that list will be very necessary to know in retrospect. You know, it's good to know some of these ideas, because Minerva for a man is a very, very high anima aspect to aspire to. Once you're able to embody some of the long list of things that I just named there, you will start coming into some real greatness in your life, you know. But most of us, men, here in this modern day society are trapped on lower levels of the anima, and that is why most of us are very, very, very immature. We're backsliding. We're falling into things that, you know, we shouldn't be falling into in this day and age, especially if we're past teenage years. You know, a lot of us are living in the past when we should be moving forwards and towards the future. Attuning yourself to a higher anima principle will bring that about, because now you have a rapport with the unconscious. Now you have a rapport with your inner life, and from the rapport with that inner life, you can look at your darkness and slay those beasts and those demons within inside of you, and move ahead into your destiny and into your vision for the goals of your life. All right. Now, as far as the Muses are concerned, the Muses, who are the inspirational goddesses of literature, science, and the arts, and were considered the energetic inspirational source of myth, poetry, and song, and in an extension, were the aids of those that compose such metaphoric works. All right. Now, the Pegasus that basically cleaved over the rock that was basically Mount Helicon and made the fountain flow forth. Okay, what's that an allusion to? Let's get to it. This is no doubt an allusion to the libido and its inspiratory waves of water gushing forth, as the water of the Hippocrene was supposed to bring forth poetic inspiration when imbibed, when drunk. This water, Carl Gustav Jung, equated to the numinous reality of the psyche equated to the numinous reality of the psyche, and that it carried a life and truth-giving essence within the conscious individual, and all individuals who are to become incarnating vessels of the Holy Spirit in the age of Aquarius, and likewise equated the flowing of water to libido, which water was equated to fire. Also see Matthew 3:11, baptism with the Holy Ghost, water and fire. I'll throw that up on the screen as well, though, too. This the alchemists called the aqua permanens, which is Mercury, the god or energy of revelation, which was to be extracted from chaos and was the alchemical aim. All right. And this alchemical aim is the elixir vitae, the second Adam is what they also called it. The illumination of the human mind, or sapientia. Sapientia now is in a large way Athena or Minerva, okay? Personified, okay? We're personifying sapientia when we look at Athena or Minerva, or if we look at Proverbs chapter 9 and we're talking about wisdom, you know. So this talking about the anima and the life that it gives you, the ability that it gives you to flow into your purpose, your calling, your destiny, your objective, your goals, you know. Also, the creation of the diamond body in Chinese alchemy is what this flowing river from Mount Helicon represents. Continuing, when Bellerophon later went to fight the Chimera, a chaos creature in that myth, he sought to use Pegasus in the fight, who was actually his brother in myth. In order to obtain the Pegasus, he slept in Minerva's temple, who came to him with a golden bridle for the task. When Pegasus saw Bellerophon with the bridle, the horse came to him and allowed him to mount, and they went to defeat the Chimera. Perseus is he who takes this role of horse rider and monster slayer in later myth. Both, however, are linked with Mithras, including Pegasus, as spiritualized libido. And Pegasus represents spiritualized libido, because if you think about it, the horse represents not only the instincts but libido. And the thing is Minerva / Athena. Minerva and Athena are basically the same deities. Tamed Pegasus before he was even able to be usable to the muses, you know. And the muses were inspiratory deities, or inspiratory of arts and different things like that, crafts, historical works, poetry. Before that was even, you know, before that was even introduced into the story symbolically, the thing is, Pegasus had to be tamed. You know, the wild libido had to be tamed in order for it to be able to be ready to be used in a higher way. All right. So and once again, as crazy as it sounds, and you can look this up, Perseus, all right, or let me see, hold on real quick. Perseus, or really Bellerophon, is linked via genealogy to the horse Pegasus. Something to look up. You don't believe me, you're probably gonna be like, man, you hear what this dude is saying, man? And it's because they're speaking of some deeper truth, and the fact that really Perseus and Bellerophon are being heroes, are connected with the sun, orderers of chaos, and being connected with the sun. And Mithras, really Mithras is now really a dead giveaway. They're libido characters as well, though, too, and also instinctual characters. And the horse is also instinct and libido. We can see that by the mere and sheer power of a horse, and then also the horse sense that it has as well, though, too. The deep sensing of things around it that it has. Instinct has that just naturally to come along with it. You know, it comes along with the territory of instinct. That even as Carl Jung stated, that intuition is actually, in a way, it's the same as instinct, but it's the opposite of instinct. It comes in the opposite way of instinct. So the thing is and it was mentioned in one of the works that Carl Jung was using to describe the idea of instinct. So this is something really to get into and think of and cultivate. But you can cultivate these things and get a deeper understanding by linking with, if you're a man, the anima, If you're a woman, you may be more predisposed to it though, but by getting into it with your getting deeper in tune with your animus, these doors will start opening it up, you know. But it's a matter of getting anima or animus development by climbing the levels, by really purifying the lato, or the body, and not the physical body, but the dead body, the things that need to be tossed out with inside of you spiritually. And through that washing and revivifying, basically what you're going to get is the new birth. You know what I mean? And that new birth is symbolized or linked to the idea of the spiritualized libido, the higher levels of anima, the higher levels of animus. So continuing forward now, right? I will put the sun and fire chart of associations on the screen to allow that the whole idea about Perseus and Bellerophon, especially Bellerophon being linked to Pegasus and being the brother of Pegasus. I'm going to put that chart up so that you can see about the ego, about the libido, about the sun, about all these different things, so you know I'm not joshing you now. All right, and I'm also going to put up a flow chart that shows the linking of these ideas. It's amazing, the spider web that is formed, and it's really an ideological linking spider web of ideas that will really open up and show you how all of these deities just in this story alone are linked. And the thing is though, is it even corresponds to what I was talking about earlier, as we're getting into when we're talking about libido. We're talking about the amygdala as well though too. We're talking about that serpent within, and the way that it speaks to us though through the older brain centers. And the older brain centers, if you think about the older brain centers, it's like we have this mammalian brain and this neocortex it's new. We have a way of seeing the world that is so far estranged from the older way of seeing things, but that older way is still leading the way on things, and we need to tap back into that, and it's really more so than anything else, if we think about it, it is getting into the idea of the unconscious. When you're talking about the amygdala, you're talking about the serpent brain, you're talking about the limbic system, you're talking about a level that's speaking a language that we're misunderstanding because of emotion. We misunderstand our emotions, anxiety, fear, in the incentivizing nature of the things that we hear sometimes, you know, to just step back, don't do this right now, but wait, this same voice is coming in when I'm about to go face something that is big, that could be something big for me, something that can make me into that could rise me up several levels on possibly the social rung, or that can give me something to think back on when I'm getting older and I'm on my deathbed. Something that can allow me to look back on some accolades, all the fear, the ramifications are being reverberated back to me through my basal ganglia, my amygdala, through the emotional center, through the more rational thought centers that are more logical, more analytic. I'm basically being deceived out of my birthright, my fate, my destiny. You see, when I listen to that, and when I don't see it as a cue to say, hey, I'm gonna do it. And when I do it, guess what? Because it's all spoken out of a way to keep me safe. Serpent's trying to keep you safe when it's doing that, because it's all done out of keeping me safe, right? I do the lazy thing. I choose not to do it. And I'm still here. Maybe I could have died if I chose to take this or that risk. But in choosing to take this or that risk, maybe I could have won. Maybe I could have risen above. Maybe I could have gotten and the accolades, the feeling of greatness, the feeling of having fulfilled my calling or destiny. You see, so I'm running around in circles on this, but it's something really so big that you need to think about, because maybe the voices that you're hearing in your head that are telling you not to do something, right, are the voices that's going to keep you from your calling. That's going to, it comes so systematically. If you think about your whole life, man, you know, like, oh, I was about to do this big race, or I was about to do this, I had this big show that I was supposed to attend, but I got stage fright. And because I got stage fright, I really could have done it, and everybody was waiting for me to show up, but I just didn't show up. So you basically missed out on something that could have opened up another path for you to go down in another way. But this whole idea gets into the hippocampus and the way that you remember things, and the way that you remember things a lot of times leads you down a road to where it's like, based on how I remember this or that happening, I'm not gonna do this, because this might turn out the same way as it did last time. BS, man. Give it a try. When you hear that voice telling you no, depending upon what it is, okay? I'm not saying, oh yeah, this voice has been telling me to go grab this, grab this sword and go run around and chop it, folks. No. I'm not talking about that. Okay? I'm not talking about that. But nevertheless, make your choices. To do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love on the will. As Crowley said, I like that statement. Wiccans say, do as ye will, but harm ye none. The will above and beyond all. But anyways, continuing. So summing this up now. Okay, we're gonna sum this up. But as I was doing all that talking, you should have seen all the connections to this idea as far as the sun, fire, libido, Bellerophon, Perseus, the idea of Pegasus. You should have seen the idea of Athena on there, or Minerva rather, which they're the same deities, and how one side is feminine, one side is masculine. Those would even refer to the feminine to the right side of the brain, the masculine to the left side of the brain, and or the feminine also to the central portion of the brain that we were talking about and terming as Eve earlier from Genesis 3. The outer portion of the brain being the more masculine side, right? That's also termed, we could put it in the same basket as the left side of the brain. We'll put the more masculine side of this map in that idea as well, though, too. It's all there. You basically see it. So this is gonna take this down to a nutshell. So the idea in this myth, hidden in this myth, okay, with all these characters, is this: simply, it is triumph over chaos via conscious libido energy and will, which readies and frees up / creates spiritual libido for use by the faculties of inspiration, or otherwise stated, the conscious and deliberate struggle towards anima and animus growth and achievement of the higher levels of such orders chaos. Chaos ordered thus turns into rectified, spiritualized libido. Libido, when tamed, for example, made ready for proper canalization into the shape of destiny and purpose, it changes from untamed animal instinct into severable, usable, malleable forms of inspiration. All right. Now, when I was talking about that sun and fire chart, there is a footnote here that I would like to read that says fire/libido means passions, affects, desires, and the emotional driving forces of human nature in general. In alchemy, alchemists were known to attribute at times the quaternary, which references 4, to fire, which is to say that the self is the source of energy. Self with a capital S, all right? It seems important to note that it is very important work towards understanding complicated ideas and functions to elucidate such via syncretic juxtaposition of like gods and archetypal symbology. The idea of Mithras as fire, sun, libido, life is also complemented by a Hebrew rendering of his real name, which is Meir. All right. Now, Meir, I spelled it out in Hebrew, Mem He Resh, equals 245. And besides giving the definitions only, I will show the gematria data so as to elucidate the importance. The definition for the transliterated Semitic root is to buy a wife, which deals with conjunctio, or give a dowry. Marriage equals unity of opposites. The heros gamos equals holy marriage unity. Be overzealous is another word, right, that deals with Meir. Rash, hasten, hurry, rush, precipitate. Now, precipitate being underlined, the last word implies a catalyst to an action or situation which causes it to ripen quickly. Also, coagulation alchemically. So coagulation means to bring something into form, okay? And desire does that, libido does that. So Mitra, Meir, is also linked with the Vedic Varuna, who is the god who binds and also god of water, oceans, and rain. In Sephiroth, the gematria for 245, which I'll show that on the screen, will show words relating to the original man, Adam Kidman, and the Holy Spirit, which I reference when talking about Pegasus and Mount Helicon and its creation of the Hippocrene spring. 245, lastly, breaks down to 200, which is the sun because of the Hebrew letter Resh, which is the letter of the sun, and 45, which is a number of the moon. So 1 through 9 added, consecutively is like 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 equals 45, and 45 equals Adam, okay? Adam, all right? And is the mystic number of the lunar Kabbalistic center, Yesod. And I put in parentheses here, this is like equation of grades, but on the tree of life. 2 is the masculine portion of the tree of life, which is wisdom, okay, Hakmah. And 9 is the number representative of Gimel, which is lunar, okay, and that links to the number 45, which, as we spoke of earlier, was Adam, but it also in a lot of ways links to Gimel, but it's Yesod, okay? So 2 equals 9 in certain Masonic initiative grades, okay? 2 equals 9 and 9 equals 2, okay? Something to think about. And then what you see here is in the number 245, the marriage of sun and moon, conscious and unconscious, all right? So by the medium of Mercury, the marriage of sun and moon, which is silver and gold, okay? By the medium of Mercury is the prerequisite goal in solutio towards the conjunction. And that reference and what I just spoke of there with the marriage of, Sol and Luna, sun and moon, silver and gold, we're not going after the alchemical method of making, an amalgam gold and silver. We're talking about the left side of the brain, right side of the brain, the conscious, the unconscious. For a man, the conscious mind and the anima, which is the silver. The silver is the anima. The conscious mind is the gold. You know what I mean? But we're trying to get that to become pure out of dross, which is that dross being Saturnine, all right, being Saturnian. So let's see. So at this point, I have finished this reading, and hopefully, my hope is that you were able to understand it and that you were able to get something out of it. And as I said earlier, I will be putting some of the slides on the screen to basically elucidate the information. I hope that you were enriched by the detailed information in this lecture, and that you were able to get something out of it and understand it. I may be, for this particular video, adding some extra videos to elucidate the content, and hope you're enriched by it. Hopefully everything here as I've explained it, because I know that there was a whole lot that just went down in this video as far as what was written. It's a whole lot of information. As you're able to unpack this information, and as I have unpacked this information, and as I go over it, I may end up at the end of this lecture series, which is now, I may end up making some extra videos to talk about more of the parts and pieces so that it can be more easily understood. So I hope that you got something good out of this tonight. And once again, we'll be back at it again with more. Please like if you like this video. Please share if you want to share this video. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Thank you, and have a great night.